Stephen Penneck. It is delightful to have you with us today. You are the president of the International Statistical Institute, ISI, and also the honorary officer for official statistics at the Royal Statistical Society, where you're a fellow and a chartered statistician. You're retired since 2012 as the Director General at the UK Office for National Statistics, ONS, and you have published several articles, given lectures on a range of topics in official statistics, including economic statistics, open data, and governance, trust, and ethics. And as we heard when Joachim introduced you and your esteemed colleague Susan Linacre has been working closely together with Statistics Sweden, SCB. And today you will be talking about growing statistical leadership. Now, Susan Linacre is unfortunately not here today, but nonetheless, she has been deeply involved in developing this presentation, as I've understood from the both of you. She also retired in 2012 as the Deputy Australian Statistician for the Australian Bureau of Statistics and was a member of the Executive Board and headed the Methodology and Quality Directorate at the Office for ONS in the UK, and is also the former president of the International Association of Survey Statisticians. So both of you have a long and deep understanding of leadership when it comes to official statistics. So very, very welcome.
Well, thank you very much. And it's really wonderful to have the opportunity to talk to you this morning. I think it's this morning in Sweden as it is in the UK.
Yeah, it is still. Also, Margareta had a question for you that you're free to either answer straight away or during your talk. The question is, what would you say is the piece that's most often missing when someone wants to grow their statistical leadership? And with that, I'm gonna leave it over to you to share your screen.
Well, thank you very much. And I will come to that question, which is really at the heart of what I want to say as I go through the presentation this morning. Apologies that Susan can't be with us, but I will. There we are. That's better. She has been instrumental in helping us develop this talk. Also, apologies that I've got a slight throat. I've just been recovering from a cold, so I have glasses of water and I have throat sweets ready. And if necessary, I'll mute myself if I need to cough. So in this talk, we want to set out what we mean by statistical leadership, and we'll consider questions such as who needs to demonstrate statistical leadership, why leadership is needed at all levels of a statistical organization, and what makes a good statistical leader, why statisticians don't always make good leaders, and how we can grow statistical leadership. Now, these thoughts have developed partly from discussions we've had with Statistics Sweden as part of the Aspire program, as you just described, but I wouldn't wish to suggest that these issues relate particularly to Statistics Sweden. Susan and I, as you say, have each had a lifetime's experience working in the UK and Australia. I worked in Australia at the ABS for 6 months and feel that these questions are widely relevant internationally. And nor are they particular to national statistics offices, although that's the examples I'll be drawing on. They have relevance to wherever statisticians need to lead in research institutes, universities, or businesses. So the current situation with the pandemic taking its toll in most countries still is has highlighted the importance of good statistical evidence as the basis for policy decisions. And I'm delighted how statisticians have risen to this challenge, whether it's mapping the spread of infections, hospitalizations, and mortality, measuring the impact of testing and the rate of vaccinations, modeling future scenarios to help decision-making, or monitoring the impact of the pandemic on human behavior and economies. Statisticians have shown the value to society of what we do. And as an official statistician, I'm enormously proud of how national statistical offices have come forward and contributed. They have developed new analyses at speed. New surveys that would have taken a couple of years to develop have been up and running within weeks. And the can-do approach has been noticed and valued by policymakers. Statisticians have been listened to by decision makers. So statisticians will want to build on the experience gained from this as they continue to develop approaches that can rapidly meet future statistical needs. So how do we build on this for the future? It's important now that the challenges that we faced as statisticians and the barriers that we have overcome that have placed the statistics at the center of decision making become an opportunity to be consolidated. That will enable our profession to be advanced and have more influence in decision making in the years to come. So we have other challenges coming up. In the UK, we have a program called Levelling Up, which is to make sure that the economic prosperity, which, as we come out of the pandemic, will be shared equally across society. And we also have the challenge of zero carbon. And in both of these areas, statistics have an important part to play. Good statistical leadership will ensure that the challenges we have a lasting impact, changing the way a national statistical institute operates, enabling the rapid development of statistical systems which change the way we develop new statistics, and that requires statistical leadership. So let's start by defining what we mean by this. For me, statistical leadership suggests two components. Firstly, statistics. Statistics is a profession, it's a set of knowledge and a set of values. We learn the knowledge through study and skills through practice and experience. Knowledge and skills are needed to collect and summarize data to provide insight, which is what we statisticians do. Probably absorb values from more experienced colleagues, from experience of particular issues or cases, and from seeing them written down. A statistician's values are based on integrity, trust, and objectivity, and are often set down in codes of practice. See, for example, the ISI's shared professional values. What do we mean by leadership? It's an important question to ask at the beginning because leadership and management often get intertwined and confused. Leading is about setting a clear direction, having a vision and communicating it. It means getting people to follow you by inspiring them, convincing them of its necessity and benefits, but also supporting them on the journey towards it. And not just the people who might be working for you, but also your key stakeholders, your customers and funders. The vision needs to be articulated so that stakeholders can see the benefits. Those who help deliver it need to be helped to identify and overcome hurdles. They need to know what it means for them. To be a leader, you need to have followers. The vision may advance strategic solutions for an organization which may be suboptimal for some parts of it. So there needs to be an understanding of the wider benefits. All of this requires a leader to have excellent communication skills. Leaders work through a strategic plan which articulates their vision and sets out the priorities and objectives needed to achieve it. Managing, though, is about marshalling and deploying resources, which might be budgets or people. A manager allocates resources in the best way to meet objectives and monitors progress towards goals. A manager will work within the framework set down in the strategic plan, developing and delivering those objectives. It's said that management is about getting work done well, while leadership is about getting work done better. Many senior people are both leaders and managers, but it's helpful for them to understand the difference. Most of this, I hope, will be fairly self-evident to you, but leadership often gets crowded out by management. So this looks like leadership is really only needed at the top level, but as we shall be arguing, leadership is needed at all levels of the organization. In a recent report, the UK's Office for Statistics Regulation, which is the government organisation that regulates statistics in the UK, make the case for strong statistical leadership by governments and by statistics offices. This is to ensure that the right data and analysis exist to support decision making and to support public confidence in statistics. But I want to turn to statistical organisations and statistics offices in particular. If we consider the top level positions in national statistics institutes, we notice that many of them, maybe most of them in Europe, aren't led by statisticians. So I've been thinking, well, why is this, and does it really matter? National statistics institutes are government departments, and the rules and practices for filling top jobs, normally described as director generals, are governed by government-wide public service procedures. And often director generals are rotated between agencies, and a posting in the NSI may be seen as a useful step in a senior public servant's career. So it's not unusual to see heads of NSIs who were previously heads of finance, IT, or some other related discipline. In some countries, top positions are filled through open competitions, but statisticians are not always seen as having the leadership qualities needed for the top job, and don't always come through. Does this matter? Well, we need to remember that NSIs are complex organizations, managing complex statistical systems, developing statistical infrastructures, and publishing a wide range of statistical products to demanding timetables, through using some of the most complex web systems around. There are ethical standards, international obligations, and best practice to take account of. A statistician leading a statistical organization will have credibility both internally and with stakeholders. There is enormous benefit in the leader having relevant experience of working in this environment and being comfortable in making the complex decisions which have significant implications for government. Having a statistician as the DG enables them to act as the government's chief statistical advisor. This role can be important at times when critical decisions dependent on data are being taken, such as during the COVID pandemic. A statistician, in frequent discussions with heads of other government departments, government ministers and prime ministers, will be able to respond quickly to questions dependent on data analysis, will earn the respect of policy colleagues, and be able to advance the influence of statistics on decision making. The leadership role is also key in presenting statistics. Statisticians are more trusted than politicians to present the facts. Certainly that's the case in the UK. We have a duty to ensure that a balanced picture of public issues, such as the impact of the pandemic, is presented using the best possible data. Of course, top leaders in statistics offices without a statistical background are likely to have important relevant experience, perhaps as a user of statistics, and will certainly have experience of government, which will bring advantage to the agency. If the DG and their immediate team do not have a statistical background, they will need to rely on advice. All leaders need to do this, of course, and none can have first-hand experience of all the situations they will need to face. But it's difficult for a non-statistician to be able to evaluate statistical advice and to hold statistical staff to account. They will need to rely on the assessments of their chief methodologist and other senior statisticians, which may conflict. Also, a leader who is a statistician will be a good role model for more junior statistical staff and more likely to ensure a pipeline of future talent. So a statistical organization, in my view, is best led by a statistician, but the statistician needs to be a good leader. So is statistical leadership only an issue for the top of the organization? We would argue that leadership qualities are important at all levels. Indeed, developing leadership skills throughout the organization is key to establishing a talent pipeline and ensuring future leadership comes from within the organization, key to ensuring future leaders are statisticians. Some of the key leadership skills that we described, communications, negotiation and developing empathy, are about the relationship with stakeholders, staff, customers, and budget holders. And everyone within an organization needs to work in teams with colleagues and with managers. So leadership skills are important at all levels. I was talking to Joy Dobbs, formerly of the ONS, formerly head of social survey there, who spoke at a recent RSS conference about the extraordinary flowering of women leaders from the UK social survey in the 1970s and 80s, which led to two of them, Karen Dunnell and Jill Matheson, later becoming national statisticians. I asked her why this was, and she said she thought it was due to the wide range of skills the unit had developed, that's the social survey unit, as a result of the need for it to compete with the private sector for work, something that was unusual in the UK. Skills that included negotiation and customer relationship building, as well as project management and operational skills. These softer skills, in her view, helped develop top leaders. Clearly, an organization cannot have dozens of people developing independent visions for their areas of work, with all pulling in different directions. Everyone has to work within the strategic framework and towards the organization's vision and goals. But given the natural capabilities of statisticians and the pride they take in their own area of expertise, there is much to be said for allowing flexibility within the overall strategic vision to encourage innovation. Clear messaging to staff, especially senior staff, about the role, goals, and values of an organization enables them to make decisions and empowers them to take risks in a dynamic environment in line with an agreed direction. This enhances job satisfaction and leads to a healthy, vibrant organization. To be effective, statisticians need to show statistical leadership in their areas of expertise. This leadership extends outside the organization to the users, with whom there must be strong engagement, and also inside the organization to partners with specialist expertise such as methodologists, ensuring that best practice approaches are being used across the agency and to areas who produce the source data that they use. So by statistical leadership, we mean leadership by statisticians at all levels. We mean statisticians using their understanding of their statistical product and its quality attributes to engage strongly with users on the best possible uses, understanding how their product is used and advising users on which uses are appropriate given their knowledge of the quality of the product. We mean developing with colleagues clear goals for that part of the organization they manage, consistent with their role and the office's goals and values. So if you know where the organization is heading, you can think about your contribution of your work area that you can make. We mean developing and delivering a clear direction for your product to meet perceived needs, having a development plan to meet future uses. We mean helping colleagues to deliver this vision by empowering them, helping them overcome obstacles and taking managed risks. Supporting colleagues is a major part of leadership. We mean collaborating with colleagues to ensure that the product remains relevant in a changing world. Collaboration between data collection, methodology, and the subject matter area and publication. And we mean contributing to corporate initiatives and infrastructure and helping the development of best practice approaches, using the learning you're gaining to help the organization as a whole. Statisticians need to develop their customers into what I call intelligent customers. Instead of reacting to customer requests, they need to understand the problems that their customer is trying to solve and how these can best be addressed. The question the customer is asking may not be the right one. By educating their customers into what the possibilities might be in terms of data and analysis, they can develop customer intelligence so that the customer and the statistician share a common understanding of the issue and the best way to solve it. So is this all about just about official statistics? Well, largely it is, because that's my background and what I know about, but it isn't exclusively. Looking beyond the public sector, we can see why it's important that statisticians develop their role as leaders in all areas of where they work. In the last 30 years, the statisticians have lost their monopoly as data analysts and interpreters. The age of computers has brought vast computing power large data sets and ready-to-use analytical software onto the desktops of anyone with the will to use them. Statisticians have needed to adapt and develop their role to continue to add value to society. They've needed to move from an advisory role with often little stake in the outcome to a more proactive value-added role, knowing how and where to apply statistical tools, rather than being the sole expert in their application. Statisticians often work in multidisciplinary teams, whether they work in government departments or in research units in an academic or business environment. They might be working alongside economists, clinicians, psychologists, or other disciplines. They will need to use their leadership skills to influence these colleagues to adopt research designs and use the best available data. Often in these discussions, it won't be for the statistician to have the final say, so the ability to influence is critical. Statisticians need to be prepared to speak up and will need to develop listening, communication, and networking skills, all part of the armory of soft skills that leaders need, and the ability to develop their thoughts into clear recommendations that others can understand and support. So, do statisticians make good leaders? Well, I've talked about the importance of statisticians demonstrating leadership, but do they naturally make good leaders? And I'm basing this slide on some stereotypes, so hopefully people won't get too upset by it, and some generalizations to help me make my point. There is evidence generally that professionals as a whole struggle in leadership roles, and often they don't seek them. Statisticians often feel that a promotion will take them further away from the job they love and leave them in a managerial job with little statistical content. And at the same time, they may put little value on acquiring leadership skills. Statisticians have some natural leadership advantages. They're able to process large amounts of information and have very well developed problem solving and critical thinking abilities. These are important leadership qualities. Similarly, statisticians usually have a well-developed sense of integrity. Statisticians tend to enjoy solving complex problems, but this can involve an excessive involvement in detail rather than taking a strategic view. Also, they sometimes may have a view that the analysis of a problem shows an inevitably right answer and can be unsympathetic to those who don't follow their logic. Their work experience may not help them to develop the strong communication and negotiation skills that leaders need. Expertise within a specialist area, whether it's national accounts, demography, or environmental statistics, brings recognition among your peers, with papers applauded in conferences and in journals. And this can be a very rewarding aspect of a statistician's work. But by focusing on being expert in and being very loyal to their own work area, statisticians can lack a broader organizational focus. They can fail to see the wood for the trees, and as a result, may not make the contribution to the organizational goals that they might. Leaders need to be comfortable with uncertainty, take calculated risks, and be prepared to fail. While statisticians are experts in uncertainty, but can be more comfortable when decisions flow from analysis and can be slow to take decisions. Statisticians have a good understanding of risk, but can often be thought to be overcautious, arguing why things should not happen, while other professions may take a more positive or flexible approach. And this can lead to statistical advice being sidelined. So if I turn now to Margaretta's question, what would you say is the piece that is most often missing when someone wants to grow their statistical leadership? Well, of course, I should say emotional intelligence, but it is that. It's about having a good understanding of yourself and what you do well that comes naturally and what you have to work on. For most statisticians in government, it's about connecting with customers. For top-level management and those working outside government, it may be about listening and negotiating. So what is it that So is it that statisticians aren't born with the necessary leadership skills, or is it that they don't develop them? It may be that the statistics profession attracts certain types of personality, backroom people, but it may also be that the practice of the profession does not naturally develop leadership skills. In order to become leaders, statisticians need to see how they can contribute to their organization's higher goals. They need to develop self-awareness, understand their own leadership style and how they might need to change. They need to demonstrate good listening skills and demonstrate empathy. They need to be pragmatic, addressing and anticipating the needs of decision makers while retaining their professional integrity. Leading change is an important leadership role, and emotional intelligence is needed, as I said, to understand why colleagues might sometimes feel uncomfortable about this. Statisticians have a unique perspective on problems. They have insights based on their skills and experience of analyzing data, and are in a good position to use these insights to add value. Adding broader leadership skills to this skill set can turn them into powerful leaders. It's important to realize that although statisticians may not naturally exhibit leadership skills, and the nature of their work rather discourages their flowering, people do change, and it is possible to develop statistical leaders. Statistical leadership can be learnt. The key is good self-awareness and a knowledge of the other half of the glass that needs to be developed. It requires the development of the professional skills needed to be a statistician, an understanding and ownership of the values that come through clear policy, discussion, and consistent example, and leadership through example, encouragement and reward, culture, and training. It is an important role of senior statisticians to be good role models, recognizing the leadership skills in junior staff and ensuring these skills are developed. This can be helped by a planned program which exposes capable staff to new situations and complex problem-solving experiences. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to your conference, and I hope this contribution has been of some help, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephen. It was insightful and truly interesting to hear your thoughts on statistical leadership and how and why we should develop it as statisticians. We do have a few questions that have come in. First one is, can you give an example on a managed risk taken by a statistician in a professional role?
Thanks very much. I would think statisticians in government are working with managed risks all the time, mostly in the methodological area. So, for example, if you're responsible for a particular statistical output, I was responsible for publishing GDP estimates at one stage, then you will have annual revisions coming through. You'll have new data sources coming through, new ways of analyzing and presenting the data, and you will have to make a judgment about which of those to allow and accept and go through, and those where you need to push back and where you need further information. So you take a risk. You don't always have complete information, and you have to make a judgment based on your experience of whether to challenge the data source, whether to challenge the new methodology, or whether you think you have enough information about the quality of those approaches to enable it to go through. So those are the sorts of managed risks you take with data. As a more senior statistician, you'll be taking decisions on priorities, on new areas of statistics to be developed, and you'll need to kind of balance user needs in different areas, particularly the needs of government against the needs of other users, and those can be difficult decisions. So I think nearly all the decisions you're taking involve an element of risk. And I think if you're looking for an innovative organization, you will want to encourage some risk-taking into new areas, some experimental data collections and some experimental analyses, but you have to recognize that you could be criticized if in fact the quality of what the work being done isn't as good as it should be. So you have to balance those risks.
All right, brilliant. Stephanie, I noticed you turned your camera on. Would you like to ask a question? No, I do have another one. Stephen, having worked in several countries and in various international settings, would you say that there are differences in how leadership should be developed in order to handle different cultural differences?
Yes, I mean, I think there are some differences. I was very fortunate when I was working in the UK that my boss, who was the national statistician, Len Cook, sent me to Australia for the ABS to work there in a management position for 6 months. And I think, you know, you gain enormously from working in a different environment and just seeing different cultures working. At the time, Dennis Truin was the government statistician in Australia, a fairly sort of quiet, introverted man, but a deep thinker. And my abiding recollection, hopefully he's not on this call and won't know this, so won't mind me saying so, he chaired a board meeting which I was at, and I can't remember the issue, but it was a difficult statistical issue that came up. And he went around the room and asked everybody for their views, and there were different views. And I was thinking, how's he going to manage this then? What's he going to say? And what he said was, well, thank you very much for your views. I'm going to go away and think about this, and I'll let you know my decision. And I thought that was a really good kind of leadership approach. Firstly, he showed he was listening. He'd have been appreciative of all the advice, but essentially he was saying, this is down to me, and I know that, and I have to take it, and I will think about it, because I'm a thinking person. You know, I'm not the person who kind of decides on the fly. I will go away and think about it, and I'll let you know. Now, I wouldn't have had that experience working in the UK. And there were things like that where you're just exposed to different leadership styles, where you kind of take a bit from this and a bit from that, and you think, well, that's actually quite useful. That didn't really work. So I would encourage people to try to work internationally if you possibly can. It's not always possible, of course, and try to get the experience. In the UK, the only kind of similar thing is we do have statisticians working in government departments as well as in the Office for National Statistics, and we do have an interchange of statisticians between government departments, and that is another way of getting different exposure to leadership.
All right, brilliant, thank you. Another question is, do you have any good advice on how to lead without a formal leading role? In academia, a statistician is often a member of a multidisciplinary team where he or she needs to build authority to be able to lead when necessary. What is your advice on how to build this authority and trust? Yeah,
it's really key. We call it leading from behind, as it were, or leading from the side. I've not worked in an academic environment, but I've seen it. And also I've been in roles in the ONS where I haven't been the top person, but I have kind of been close to them and have seen what needed to be done. It's about building trust, and that's about listening and understanding their leadership style and understanding what they need. I think you need to be able to provide answers to people to enable them to sort of make the decisions that they need to make. And you also need to provide advice on what the downside might be. I think it's a long process of building trust. I mean, in an organization where you're working, I worked as in a kind of chief of staff role for a while, and there you build quite a close relationship with your senior boss and can advise them over a period. You have those quiet moments with them, usually at the end of the day, where you sit down with them and reflect and talk about things. And that's where you may well have influence that you wouldn't have in a kind of more formal meeting, where, you know, your role may not enable you to come forward with advice in that way. I think working in an academic environment where you're working with multidisciplinary teams, well, I've worked in government when I worked in the Department of Trade and Industry. I worked as a statistician in an economics unit, because they were nearly all economists, they're not statisticians, and they all felt they knew the answers to all the problems of the world, of course. And that was a question of trying to influence and working alongside people. And you had to show people that you actually have something to offer, and that it is of value. And it's not by telling them that, it's by showing them that, it's by demonstrating it. And by showing them the analysis that you've got, explaining where it's come from, and explaining why, all right, it might not be in line with their theories and their approaches, but actually does need to be listened to.
Excellent advice, thank you. Another question, it sort of touches on the same here. You mentioned having a leader, a director general, for instance, that does not have statistical knowledge. How can you act? What is your recommended approach in such a setting if you are a statistician?
Well, you have to surround them with statisticians, that's all. I mean, you know, that there are good director generals who are not statisticians, but have the big thing they bring usually in government is that they have good connectivity within the government framework because they've worked in other government departments. So they have the connections with ministers and so on, which can be used. So there's huge advantages from that. But they have to get a very quick understanding of the statistical office, the statistical infrastructure and so on, which is a really big, huge problem. So if you're working alongside them in some way or close to them, you have to help them do that. Their big problem is always, you know, if they get contradictory statistical advice, you know, if there's a question about whether we should start a new statistical collection or something, or how to do some statistical analysis, and they could well get contradictory advice from the product area and from the methodologists and so on. In the end of the day, I think having a chief methodologist who's trusted at a senior level in the organization on the board, who's trusted by the director general, is really quite key, because that will be the go-to person for statistical advice. But I would say that you need others as well. You know, you do need a board which has got statisticians on it who have a good understanding of the organization, and their job is to make sure that the DG gets the best statistical advice.
All right, brilliant. Another question regards what we're seeing with analysis paralysis and an abundance of data and statistics. How can we as statisticians and statistical leaders help overcome the analysis paralysis problem?
I think it's a problem, and it's particularly a problem given the facility with which analysis can be done, and also the facility with which analysis can be done by anybody outside government or whatever. Certainly one of the problems in my ISI role, I was at the World Data Forum in Bern in Switzerland a couple of weeks ago, which was focusing largely on sustainable development. And one of the difficulties that developing countries have is the surfeit, if you like, of analysis that comes forward from different agencies trying to measure economic and societal progress in their country, and the difficulty they have in trying to understand which data source to use, particularly if they have one which is actually more favorable than the official one, which is not so favorable, and things like that. I think it's the job of senior statisticians in countries to try to kind of cut through this a little bit and try to ensure that the presentation that goes to government is the best possible one and the simplest one to enable them to understand it. You can't, I know one country tried to make other people's analysis illegal, which was not the right approach. You know, you have to accept that all of this undergrowth, if you like, is out there. And the job of the statistician is to be able to extract from that the key elements. I mean, statistical work isn't just about producing analysis, it's about producing information. It's about producing information which informs decisions. And information has to be very clearly presented in terms of what the key elements are. What I'd say, I'm not really answering the question very well, I don't think, but what I would say is that the statisticians should give a lot of attention to this. It's not just a matter of producing your statistical product and out it pops at the end, and that's fine. You know, statisticians also need to be looking at all of the information going on out there in the social media world and everything, and trying to make some sense of this for people who have to make decisions. And decision makers aren't just governments, they're also businesses and they're also citizens, and we should pay attention to that as well.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Do we have any other questions from the auditorium? either raise your hand or also unmute if you want to ask a question. Very well. Once again, thank you very, very much, Stephen, for joining us today. It has been an absolute pleasure listening to you talking about growing statistical leadership. As mentioned before, we are keen on focusing on education. So we will, as thanks to our speaker, donate some to UNICEF and their work with Afghan children to make sure that they get proper education, which we think is an important task today. So Stephen, you also have a question for Maria Günther, who is going to be our speaker to lunch. Is your question for her?
Yes, apologies for my throat. Yes, my question to Maria is, it's a very interesting topic. What would you like producers of statistics to do to make it easier for you to present the simple truths from complex data? This relates a little bit back to the question that was just asked for me, so I'm kind of passing it on, as it were.
Brilliant, seeing how we really interconnect this entire day. Once again, thank you so much, Stephen, and give our regards to Susan as well, who's been deeply involved in this talk as well. Thank you so much.